Cinema Classics is sponsored by the Gateway Film Center and is produced by John DeSando and Johnny D. Loretto. Listen to shows online at wcbe.org. I'm John DeSando.
I'm Johnny D. Loretto.
This is Cinema Classics.
Yeah.
And oh boy, is it old.
It is a venerable institution at this point.
Gosh, I mean 600 shows?
We have done our 600th show. Is this the 600th?
Yes, this is.
This is the 600th.
This is actually it. I'm not lying about this
Wow.
one. So that's about 11 years for us.
Man.
We do one a week. And I'm just amazed. But what I was hoping to do with your capacious memory,
Yeah.
or let's just say with our two sensibilities, what's happened in the 10 years, 11 years that we've been on? What can we look back and say has happened for us and cinema?
Yeah, well, for cinema is it seems like a constantly evolving, changing, adapting sort of experience. I mean, cinema also is, when I think of cinema, I think of what's being made and how we're seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, has slowly evolved. But it's something that's happened since the beginning of the medium, from the transition from silent to sound, from black and white to color, from your 1:1 aspect ratio to your big panoramic cinemascope aspect ratio, to the birth and death of musicals, the birth and death of westerns, the rise of sci-fi, the rise of the summer blockbuster. Like, there's so many little avenues you can explore, but through it all, cinema has, and audiences along with it, adapted to other things going on, other developments, other new forms.
And we've seen the way in which you can see it. And we even devoted a whole show to video on demand.
Yeah.
So that has changed. But it seems to me that we've held on to the strong traditions you were just talking about in Cinema Classics by taking contemporary movements, contemporary movies, and connecting them with the classics of the past, right?
And you don't have to work very hard to do it, because if you are a movie lover, if you're a cinephile, a cineast, whatever you want to call yourself, a buff, movies are so much richer when you have some historical context for their making, the production, who was in it, what else that person was in, what other movie this director made, who the cinematographer was, the period in which, the moment that it was created, all the, you love all those little production stories behind the scenes.
That's right.
That all enriches one's experience of seeing a film. Sometimes it's a little bit sad to me that movies are so quickly, as consumers, we just kind of devour them, spit them out, move on to the next thing. And there's such a rich, textured art form with so much history behind them. And I feel like, it's really easy to look at a movie made today and go, hey, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of this Kirk Douglas picture from 1950. And that's so much fun. And it just keeps opening little windows and doors for you to climb
what's
through.
fun for me is that you can take a contemporary director like Martin Scorsese, and you can cover that 10 years of our production and go back at 20, 30 years with his oeuvre and make the connections that we're talking about. And we're capable of doing that, and we do it every week.
Well, that's a perfect example of somebody who was a movie lover themselves.
Good.
And who devoured films as a child, as a young man. And so when you watch Scorsese's movies, he even if you listen to any sort of commentary or interviews with him, he will spew forth all of this cinematic knowledge, who he was referencing, what inspired this shot, how he arrived at, there's certain Scorsese techniques, I think, that many of us recognize the minute you see them. Those are things that travel back into the past, to foreign films that he'd seen as a younger student and a fan.
Well, I love the way a recent show we had on Rear Window, we were able to bring Hitchcock back to the present.
Yeah.
And and the business of voyeurism and the sophistication of that in these days was an easy point for us to make.
And that's, I'm glad you brought that up. So let's say somebody, a more, somebody who only traffics in more contemporary films, sits down to watch Dave Franco's The Rental.
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
And then we tell you, hey, check out Rear Window and see if that doesn't change any of that, or if you can't see an evolution there, or just make the connections. Making connections is fun, and that's what I think a lot of people are like. Critics are always telling you what to think. Never telling you what to think. We're only telling you what we think,
yes.
and hopefully, and hopefully that bounces off your experience and maybe shines a light on something you didn't think about, or makes you think about something else. But that's fun. It's fun to do.
Oh, listen, we have a ball. We can go from talking about romances to talking about horror films to talking about actors, talking about directors.
Yeah.
Or we can indulge our whims, like I'm going to say, the show we did on the 25th anniversary of James Bond.
Oh, yeah, right.
Okay?
Yeah.
We can take that, which is a personal favorite of yours, the whole Bond sequence.
Right, and that's 50 years of cinema.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something with just under 2 minutes left. What have you learned about your own criticism or your own approach to films over the course of, well, I mean, you've been doing this longer than just we have, but over the course of your critical career, how are things changed for you?
Things have changed for me in that I have seen a much broader canvas for movies of the kind that you were talking about that we really do on Cinema Classics. It's Movie Time, the other show, which is focused on current films that are out there right now. I find myself with less time to talk about the connection it makes with our culture. And really, that's what we're talking about. When we talk about the 10, 11 years we've been on and the 100 years that we use to draw from, we're talking about a whole cultural education. And what for me has changed is that I've become more aware and more knowledgeable about that span than I was before. It forces me, our show forces us to look at the history of cinema without being like college professors who are forcing students to listen to this.
Right.
It just comes out of our show. So that's what's been really helpful.
Yeah. Over the years for me, it's I think I'm more easygoing and less, I think when I first started as a film critic, I was hot out of school, a freshly minted film studies degree, and I was, really passionate about the things that I thought were great. I was really passionate about the things that I thought were great, and I had certain ideas about what I would and would not countenance, and that has changed. I'm so much more open to different types of films, and I've gone back even and rediscovered films that early on that I would have turned my nose up at, or even I saw and was too, hard-nosed to kind of accept on its own terms. I've rediscovered. I mean, I'm a big Tom Cruise fan now. That is a thing that wasn't always true. I'm an Adam Sandler fan now. That's a thing that I used to really rail against that guy in his career. So, I guess I've loosened up a little bit. I still get really annoyed talking about films with people who aren't as passionate as I am about it.
And I so much appreciate your partnership on this, because you are very open and critical of films and of yourself, as you just were now. And I've seen you also tighten up even more on a director whom we both like, Woody Allen.
Oh, yeah.
As you've evolved, as I've watched it.
He's devolved as I've evolved.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
600 shows. We can advise our audience.
See you in 2040.
No, I was going to tell them, if they want a very simple film education, Film 101, go back and listen to our 600 shows.
Yeah, there you go.